All right, couple of media stories that we could not resist. All right, you're gonna enjoy this one. So Elon Musk has been in full troll mode recently, taking away the New York Times blue checkmark, which is legitimately funny, and now another move, which I also think is legitimately funny. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. He marked NPR as U.S. state-affiliated media on Twitter. Same designation that like RT or whatever would ultimately get. And so obviously there was a lot of debate about this and a lot of hand-wringing among liberals in particular. How dare you? Now, just like I looked at the numbers, NPR does receive a significant portion. I think like 10%. Hold on, I've got it
So
here.
this is where it's in dispute, and that's actually what I wanted to spend some time on.
Yeah.
So they claim that they only get 1% or so of their operating budget from the federal government, or at the very least in taxpayer dollars. However, in several of their communications, they actually say that it would be impossible for them to actually it would be impossible for them to operate without federal funding. So the true figure is actually very unclear. But in their marketing dollars, from what they have put out at least so far, they make it clear that federal appropriations, at least in some cases, are basically the only reason that they are allowed to exist on top of their overall donors.
So Michael Tracy has been digging into this a lot.
Yeah, I know.
And so I have one of the things that he pulled up here. I mean, first of all, yes, in their communications, they said federal funding is essential to public radio service, the American public, and its continuation is critical for both stations and program producers, including NPR. And then they offered a breakdown of where their funding comes from. The plurality, 43%, according to their communications, comes from individuals. 8% comes from federal appropriation and 5% comes from federal, state, and local governments. So you're talking about 13% there.
That's not nothing.
Coming from government entities. And look, by the way, I'm actually fine with the government like supporting nonprofit radio, PBS, whatever. I don't have an issue with it. But there has always been a level of not even arbitrariness, but clear bias in how news outlets are labeled, whether they are dismissed as state propaganda or not, based on the relationship to, like, is it an allied nations state propaganda network? Is it a U.S. state propaganda network? Or is it a, official U.S. bad guy states state propaganda network? And that's just not just on Twitter. That's on all kinds of places. Like, things like Voice of America, which are truly, or the BBC. Right, which are truly, I mean, Voice of America is directly like American U.S. government propaganda. And that doesn't get the label on certain platforms where, of course, RT, which also, deserves the label and people should be aware of the biases inherent there, consistently does. So I'm not saying Elon is being even-handed here. Of course, he's not. He's being completely biased as well. And my bigger issue, I have complicated feelings about this because in some ways I'm like, maybe our lives would all be better if Twitter just did like die and go away. So I can't even say like I'm fully mourning it. But the one silver lining to me is that his totally random, capricious, troll-like behavior really demonstrates the total arbitrariness with which all of these platforms are really run and how much they are just subject to the whims of whoever happens to be in control. And I don't think it's a bad thing that that is exposed. So I see it as sort of silver lining, even as I find most of his decision-making at Twitter to be a total disaster, and the platform is already significantly degraded and way less useful and way less of a decent user experience than it used to be, and it already wasn't great.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And nothing would convince you that NPR is not state media than the White House press secretary coming to their defense.
Yeah, so social media companies make their own independent decisions about content rules, so I won't comment on Twitter's rules, but what I will say more broadly, I'll say there's no doubt of the independence of NPR's journalists. And has been, if you've ever been on the receiving end of their questions, you know this. You know that they have their independence in journalism. NPR journalists work diligently to hold public officials accountable and inform the American people. The hard-hitting independence nature of their coverage speaks for itself.
Why does she have a prepared statement defending NPR as not state media when she's the government propagandist? That's nuts. That actually convinces you the opposite. NPR's managing editor also put out a very upset statement. Let's put this up there on the screen. We were very disturbed to see last night Twitter has labeled NPR state media description that per our guidelines does not apply to NPR. NPR and member stations are supported by millions of listeners who depend on us for independent fact-based journalism that we provide. NPR stands for freedom of speech and holding the powerful accountable. It is unacceptable for Twitter to label us this way. A vibrant, vigorous, free press is essential to the health of our democracy. But some of us didn't yet forget about a tweet sent in October of 2020. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. From the NPR public editor. Why haven't you seen any stories from NPR about the New York Post Hunter Biden story? Read more in this newsletter. Here's the quote. We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories. We don't want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions. So how can the Biden administration claim with a straight face that they have faced tough questions from NPR when they were the most forward and out there, really, in leading the campaign to discredit the Hunter Biden laptop story? Like, you're a joke. You're not actually independent. You are 100% actually state-affiliated media with an obvious bias. And as you said, Crystal, you know what? It's just a joke that we all pretend that VOA, Radio Free Europe, and BBC and all these other also aren't. Yeah, they are. Good. You know, I guess just put the label on all of them.
Yeah, just be consistent. Right. I mean, and again, this isn't consistent. The problem for NPR is actually not that they receive funding from the government, because it's not like their ideological disposition changed during the Trump years when they were getting funding from the Trump administration, right? Their issue is the same issue that CNN has, that MSNBC has, which is a sort of ideological capture really by their audience base, where they, rather than really doing independent fact-finding or really surfacing stories that are stories in their own words, they're serving their audience, which is overwhelmingly like affluent, liberal, educated liberals. And so they are putting out the content through the ideological lens that serves that audience base. Same thing New York Times is doing, same thing CNN is doing, same thing MSNBC is doing. So yes, they get funding from the government, but the real issue with them in terms of any, you know, their reporting failures, in particular on the Hunter Biden issue, is more about sort of ideological audience capture and playing to where they see their primary revenue coming from, their, you know, ideologically not diverse base. That's where I think they get into trouble in the same way as many other news organizations.
I think you're correct. Yeah, the entire thing just reveals like how much of a farce really that they handle themselves. And yeah, look, the freak out is delicious. It's enjoyable. And to the extent that I'm enjoying the chaos, even though my own personal Twitter experience has become far worse, this is definitely why.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.